fire bricks cost 1/10 the cost of batteries per kilowatt hour, and you don't need a furnace anymore. So they have potential for 90% of industrial processes, and so that's one of the technologies I'm really optimistic about.
This is a reminder that I need to talk to you more often, Mark. It's been way too long. I'm Saul Griffith. I'm an engineer and entrepreneur, author of the book Electrify, another book called The Big Switch, and a new book called Plug In, all about how electrification is our principal strategy for cleaning up our energy system in a climate sense. And for the last half a dozen years, I've been pretty heavily involved at the intersection between technology and policy.
Hi, I'm Mark Jacobson. I'm a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University and have been here for over 30 years now. And I work on studying air pollution, weather, and climate, and developing clean, renewable energy solutions to pollution and climate problems. And over the last 15 years or so, have been developing energy plans to transition states and countries and cities and towns entirely to clean, renewable energy. So I'm happy to talk about this further.
I've been interested in clean energy, I think, for a very long time, partly illustrated from where I'm calling in from. I'm actually about 300 miles south of Sydney today in a little coastal town called Bermagui, and I grew up having vacation experiences with an artist mother and engineer father where we would visit the beautiful places in Australia. This morning I woke up to a couple of pelicans and an Australian native goose and some kookaburras and magpies. And I think my affinity for the natural world always sparked my concern for what we are doing environmentally as a species, and the biggest environmental problem of all that impacts everything from air quality and human health to climate to species loss is climate change. And so that gelled with my natural interest in engineering and technology. So I've been pretty much working on it for my entire adult life.
So I've been working on clean renewable energy technologies, or trying to fit them into energy plans for countries and states and cities and towns for a while now. And I've come across some really interesting new technologies. One that I can think of that I think will have a big impact are called fire bricks. These are kiln bricks that have been around, or they're similar to kiln bricks that have been around for thousands of years, since the Bronze Age, for lining kilns. But they can be used now in certain compositions. They can be used to store heat at very high temperatures for industrial processes. So if you have renewable electricity, let's say we go to 100% renewable electricity worldwide for everything, including industry, we'll need a lot of wind and solar in particular to provide that electricity. And a lot of times we'll have excess electricity. So when you have fire bricks for industrial processes, you can use excess electricity to heat those bricks up to very high temperatures, up to 2,000 degrees Celsius. And then you can store that heat for many, many days, in fact. And when you need that heat for an industrial process, you can blow air through channels in the bricks, and you'll get temperatures in the order of 1,500 degrees or so to melt metals. And this can avoid entirely the need for not only fossil fuels for high temperature heat entirely, but even electric heaters like electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces. So all you need is electricity and these bricks, and they are heated by resistance heating, different types.
And an air fryer for steel.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's, instead of batteries, the alternative is to take excess renewables, store that electricity in batteries, and then run arc furnaces, induction furnaces on that battery electricity. But fire bricks cost 1/10 the cost of batteries per kilowatt hour, and you don't need a furnace anymore. So they have potential for 90% of industrial processes, and so that's one of the technologies I'm really optimistic about.
I'm also fascinated with bricks at the moment, partly because brick making is so carbon intensive today, but you can also, not your fire bricks, but another application, we're entering a world, particularly in those countries that are adopting a huge amount of rooftop solar, where there's negatively priced electricity during the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to make in going to an all-electric, clean kiln process for firing the bricks themselves that we have a zero emission pathway to making all of those bricks for you.
Yeah, well, yeah, that excess electricity during the middle of the day, which you can see actually in California this year already, there's been 9 days out of 20 that we've gone over 100% renewables in the dead of winter.
In the dead of winter, that's amazing.
Several hours, including yesterday, it was like 5 hours yesterday. And when that happens, what happens to that extra electricity? Well, half right now is exported out of state, half is stored in batteries, regular batteries, but there are all these other options. You can heat fire bricks. You can use it for maybe producing some hydrogen for some processes that are needed, or store low temperature heat. So there's all this potential for excess electricity, and there will be more since we're growing renewables rapidly. We can go to electric heat pumps for air heating, water heating, air conditioning, even clothes drying and dishwashing for heating, electric induction cooktops for stoves for replacing gas stoves that would reduce energy requirements by about 60%. The heat pumps reduce energy requirements 75 to 80% even. Electric LED lights for lighting, energy efficient buildings, weatherizing homes, and for the vehicles, as mentioned, electric vehicles for industry. Fire bricks can replace most industrial heat processes, but also even if you're not using fire bricks, then electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces, dielectric heaters, electron beam heaters, and electric heat pumps for low temperature heating. So we have the electric appliances and machines for the most part. We know we can provide the electricity with onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and power plants, and concentrated solar power, geothermal, which can be enhanced geothermal now, a lot of existing hydroelectric power, and maybe tiny amounts of tidal wave power. So we have the technologies. It's really a question of deploying as fast as possible to solve these problems.
Just to put a giant dollar sign and exclamation mark behind Mark's point, in Australia, rooftop solar now installs at about 55 or 60 US cents per watt. That's about 1/4 or 1/5 of the price it does in the US. The difference is a regulatory and a permitting difference. But once you get that rooftop solar to 60 cents a watt, that equates to 2 or 3 cent per kilowatt hour electricity. You can now store energy in batteries for somewhere between 8 and 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So that solar and that battery delivers electricity to everyone cheaper than the grid probably ever will ever again. And we're seeing that the households that are going all electric with Mark's recipe, my recipe, our recipe, induction stoves, electric vehicles, heat pumps for the water and space heating, we see in those households a reduction in cost of living of about $5,000 a year on their energy prices. So we now see it's possible. It's a matter of, can we get international cooperation about making more of these things? Can we get the regulatory and policy optimization that makes these things cheaper? Because really we have a pretty bright future ahead that's a lower cost energy system with far fewer health problems than the current fossil fuel based system. And the economic wins are well and truly behind us now. It's
a myth that a lot of people claim that higher renewables result in higher costs of energy. And people often point to California as having high renewables and a high cost. But it's true that it has high cost, but it has nothing to do with the renewables. It has to do with the cost of wildfires being passed on to customers, the cost of the San Bruno and Aliso Canyon gas disasters passed on to customers, cost of strengthening underground gas lines because of those disasters, or the San Bruno disaster in particular, the cost of keeping Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant open, the cost of the transmission and distribution upgrades, the cost of undergrounding transmission lines. These are all what causes cost to go up, and nothing to do with the growth of renewables, which are decreasing costs throughout the U.S. and the world.
I think there's a great point to sort of answer the question, what really are the hurdles to this electrification program, if you like, now? I think there are still significant cultural hurdles. People like things they had, and we don't necessarily love change. And I think that applies to everything from your choice of car to you're an old steel mill manager and you're reluctant to adopt new technology. So there's these cultural problems, but the real hurdles that I now see are mostly regulatory, and the biggest one of all is we need electricity market reform and regulation of electricity is better. We are seeing the cost of gas networks everywhere go up, but we're still trying to cling to the idea that those gas networks are part of the future. Unfortunately, by doing so, we're raising the price of all of the energies. So commitment to all electric cities without gas really would make a huge economic win. And then we are roadblocked on permitting for large renewable generation. This is a problem globally. Just getting the transmission lines in and the interconnects connected is still too slow and too cumbersome, and unfortunately slows down the transition. So, we can get there, but the hurdles are, in my mind, cultural and regulatory at this point. I'd say another significant hurdle is that we're misinterpreting what China is doing. They're trying to go all electric because they don't have much domestic oil or gas. So for them, it makes sense. Unfortunately, America is interpreting it as a trade war, but there really is an opportunity, and I think it's worth expressing. There's more to be made in financing these renewables than there is in selling the hardware. And so I think there's an opportunity, really, if we thought broadly and generously about it, for America and China to win in financing and building these things out, while, quite frankly, America catches up a little on manufacturing the batteries and the solar and the electric vehicles.
Hurdles that I see are competition among proposed solutions. There are several proposed solutions, such as carbon capture, direct air capture, blue hydrogen, electrofuels, small and large nuclear reactors, bioenergy of all sorts, that money is being spent on and subsidized. In the U.S., 40% of the Inflation Reduction Act goes to these technologies, which don't help at all. And 60% is going to good things. But, wasting 40% of funding on things that don't work is really slowing down a solution. And it's not only the U.S., many countries are subsidizing several of these technologies. So that's one of the problems. What are the impacts of a transition on health from an air pollution point of view in particular? So worldwide, there are about 7.5 million people who die from air pollution each year. And about 90% of these are from energy. And 90% of the deaths are from energy-related pollution, and 10% are from biomass burning and other non-energy pollution. And a transition to clean renewable energy worldwide would eliminate these deaths. So on the order of over 6 million deaths per year. And these are avoidable deaths. When people look at just climate damage and trying to solve climate change, they often come up with solutions that may improve climate, but actually do not improve health, air pollution health. In fact, can make it worse. For example, carbon capture, direct air capture, they do nothing for health except to make health problems worse because they require more energy, on the order of 25% more energy. And if that energy comes from fossil fuels, then you've got 25% more emissions and deaths. If they come from renewables, those renewables can no longer replace fossil fuels, so you still have more air pollution deaths. So same thing with bioenergy. Bioenergy still involves combustion for the most part, and that results in air pollution death. So we need solutions that address both health and climate simultaneously, and by the way, energy security simultaneously. But fortunately, we have those solutions. That's clean, renewable energy, electrification, electrify everything, and provide the electricity with clean, renewable sources such as wind, solar, geothermal, hydro. And that'll eliminate air pollution and health problems simultaneously.
I just wanted to talk to not only the health benefits, great, but I think there's one story that we are not telling, which I think is extraordinary, which is the impact on local economics. So a huge amount of this energy that is going to come from renewables, the cheapest is the renewables that are closest to you, generated on your roof or generated in your community, typically solar. That can get to your home or your business cheaper because it avoids a lot of the transmission and distribution costs. But even more significantly, so imagine your community that doesn't make gasoline, and very few communities anywhere in the world make gasoline. So in my community, I live in a suburb or a zip code, if you like, that has about 4,000 homes in it. We spend about $22 million a year buying gasoline. We can, in fact, produce enough solar in our community just on our rooftops and using some of the local public buildings to power the community completely to all electric vehicle transportation. And we'd be doing so, we would be saving about $15 million per year within that community. This is a community with 2 schools and 2 churches and sort of reasonable size. But actually the local economic activity that is going to be enabled and created because you're not having that money leave on a one-way ticket to buy fossil fuels either from a foreign country or from Texas or an oil refinery somewhere is quite extraordinary, and I think is going to have an incredible impact on local economies. It's yet one of the other. Not only do we not emphasize the positive outcomes health-wise, but there's going to be very positive outcomes economically for those communities that fully embrace this. I'm going to ask you a provocative one, Mark. I shy away from being 100% renewable. I think the planet's probably 98. I think there's a few places that are a bit too dark, a bit too cold, and I might say yes to a little bit of nuclear power. And just to be provocative, I want your response.
Well, my response is, there's the facetious response is, nobody wants to go 98% of the way to the moon. So if we're going to go 98%, why not just go 100%? But from a practical
I think
point,
I want to go 100%, but I think I'm acknowledging human behavior and that not everyone wants to do it the way I want to do it.
Right. No, that's true. There's the social and political obstacles to doing it. So, I mean, electrifying everything, you've written a lot of books on electrifying everything. And well, have you seen a shift? I mean, what are the major shifts you've seen both in perception and actual implementation in the last 10 years? I mean, do you see as an order of magnitude shift, or do you just see incremental changes of what your vision has been?
It's going to be hard to say this to you and to an American audience, but I'm seeing 180-degree shift in other countries in the world, and precisely because the economics are working. Yeah. In the part of the world I'm living in, we don't have tariffs on Chinese solar and Chinese cars and Chinese batteries. I can buy a brand new electric vehicle from China for less than $20,000 at the lot that goes 300 miles. I can install solar on my roof that delivers electricity behind my meter at 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. I can get batteries at $200 a kilowatt hour. I add all those things together and I can lower the cost of my life. Because that is happening in Australia, we now have, and think about this number, in some jurisdictions, more than 50% of households have rooftop solar. Across the country as a whole, 35% of households have rooftop solar. Compare that to less than 2% in the US.
Yeah, that's impressive.
It's the largest contributor to the electricity on our grid is the rooftop solar. This could be true in the US. Anywhere south of 40 degrees of longitude, this really makes sense, which is the great majority of the US. But that means that public opinion has turned because people sell the solar to their neighbor. They're like, oh, mate, I'm paying 3 cents a kilowatt. You're paying 30. You should get some rooftop solar. Oh, yeah. Once you got cheap rooftop solar, you should put it in an electric car. Then you're driving for free, mate. Yeah. And you're seeing that cultural revolution at ground level. We're starting to see the contractors and the tradespeople selling the electric solutions, not selling against it. I see this happening in Asia. I see this happening in New Zealand. I see this happening in Africa. These non-ideological countries that don't produce their own fossil fuels seem to be the narrative can shift very quickly. I wonder about your opinion. I feel like we're failing to tell this incredible story of abundance that this enables. And the question I should ask you, Mark, is how do we tell our vision for the future in a more compelling way? I think you and I would both acknowledge we've been trying for a few decades and it's broken through a little at the edges, but we're still not a mainstream vision.
Yeah. Well, I think it is storytelling. Like some of the stories you've told are really compelling, and I try to get people to appreciate it. But I think also that people are adopting renewable energy in places where there are no policies, such as, in the U.S., where is most of the wind? It's in states that have no policies favoring wind. It's because it's so cheap. And that's what we're relying on in a lot of places: low cost of solar, low cost of wind, batteries, electric heat pumps, electric vehicles. as their costs come down, people are adopting them because they save huge amounts of money, especially when you consider the fuel cost savings. So it's part of it is trying to convince people, but part of it is people are getting convinced themselves because of low cost. And I think that's really what is driving it. But I think from my point of view, it's not so much that do I have to convince everybody. It's like I'm just going to do the best I can to bring the message forward. And as I think it was Coach John Wooden, who was a UCLA basketball coach, said, as long as you're trying your best, nobody can fault you for failing. And so I'm going to try my best to get the information out, do what I do is the science, and promulgate that information to the public as I can. And whether it happens or not, that's a different issue, but I at least have to try my best.
Well, I thank you for trying.
Well, likewise.
I think far too few of us really just take the time to appreciate and celebrate the true magnificence of the planet we have, and to celebrate the idea that I think, to be honest, for the first time in human history, you can see a pathway for humans to live very, very, very well in harmony with the planet. Not only can we do this electrification, 100% renewables, all clean energy, improve our air quality, lower our cost of living, but it's actually also the pathway to a circular economy and a much lighter footprint on the planet. And I just think this Earth Day, it's worth reflecting that it might be the first Earth Day in human history where we really know how to appreciate and love the planet and how to deliver sort of a human harmony with the planet. And I'd like to think that a few of us reflect on that.